Welcome back, everyone. We found Hans. Hi, Hans. We're ready
Hi.
for you. So, without further delay, we're going to start our session, our online lab session in English with Hans from Tappable.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hannah. And a big welcome from me to all of you joining here for this session. So let me tell you about Tappable. Actually, it didn't start in the proverbial garage. It started in Kenya. And it started in Kenya as a solution to a communication problem with our customers. In the summer of 2018, we launched our second product in Kenya. And it was a budgeting website and chatbot. It helped people in Kenya find the best airtime and internet bundles among more than 300 different products on offer from local telecom operators. But very quickly we ran into a problem. And that was to communicate boring content, admitted, to young people between 18 and 25 years of age, all of which access the internet from their mobile phones. And I can tell you that writing and sending 800-word blog posts about this content, that didn't work. We got about 20 seconds session time. Web stories, however, did. And overnight, session time went up tenfold to about 200 seconds of session time. But that's when we ran into another problem, because every story had to be hard-coded, because the tech that we were using was still experimental. And it took us about 4 days to get a story online. So at that time, we decided to build a story editor first, and this became Tappable. So during the next 45 minutes, I'll share with you what we have learned about web stories over the last 2 years, what they are, what you can use them for, and how to get started. I'll also share with you some web story use cases that really work, and together we'll go through how we created a story about the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and we'll put it online together live during this session. So let's have a look at Tappable and let's see what there is to say. So you may ask the question, why stories? Well, I mean, stories is the best way to actually share mobile content. It is vertical because people actually on mobile content, they're using mobile content differently, right? So it is vertical. It has to be responsive because there's a million different telephone sizes. It has to be very quick and visual and uncluttered navigation there. And we believe as people are on the go, it has to be snackable. The story format, I don't need any explanation there. We're currently at about 1.8 billion daily active users, and that's because it's a first format that's really native to mobile devices. So, but that's also where the problem lies, because stories are essentially social media, right? And because they're social media, the social media wants to keep them on your platform, so they actually wall them off. The use of stories is restricted essentially to social media platforms. And this is where we believe that web stories come in. But really, what are web stories? So let me use a few slides to take you through really what web stories are all about. So web stories is about creating and publishing immersive and engaging content for mobile, right? The images come in full bleed, as you can see from the video that is shown. It is a short form copy that evolves, and it evolves as a sequenced narrative. So there is a thread to it, and there are unlimited call to actions. You can put a CTA on every single page that you are creating. Technically, they are mobile optimized web pages. You know, there is a URL which you can see from the head of the telephone there. It is published under stories.tappable.co, a subdomain of our URL. And as a URL, every content, be it text or images, is fully searchable, and it stays online as long as you want. It is also shareable on all the major platforms. Again, the video that you're seeing here is a WhatsApp, right? So you can share basically your stories on WhatsApp, and you can see the meta images and the meta descriptions appear. And once that's shared, the recipient can actually click on it, and it's going to open immediately in full bleed on the telephone, as you see it happening here. The same applies to social media. So you can basically push the URL into a social media post like I've done here in my LinkedIn post, and you see that it will open immediately from the LinkedIn post into a full bleed in the story on your screen. And finally, but this is just an example, it is also very handy for sending out in emails rather. And again, once a user clicks on the link, it's going to open in full screen on your phone. The very thing about web stories is that they're extremely fast because they're caged and preloaded on the phones, right? And what I've taken here is a screenshot from our internal analytics, and you can see that over 500,000, 500,000 story views through 193 countries in the world. The page load time was just over a second. Now, if you take into consideration the core Web Vitals, that's going to apply to Google from 2021, this is a major factor. Web stories are interactive, and you can see here a small video of quizzes and polls that you can very easily apply into stories to get feedback from your audience. And the search results in Google mobile searches are pretty impressive, because here you can see how visual stories are going to come up. They're grouped together in a grid under visual stories, and they open up and you can click through and swipe through from one story to another. This is currently limited largely to the USA, but that's going to come out worldwide later on. In the meantime, we have to do with still large visual images and poster images on mobile searches with quite a bit of screen space in our searches here in Europe, for instance. And the same, more clear even, applies to image searches. As you can see, all the images from the story are being presented in priority at the top of the screen. This is a good one. Actually, the timing is perfect, because what I'm showing here is in December we had about 4.5 million impressions of our stories in Google Discover. And yesterday Google announced that now, from today onwards, stories will be pushed to the top of the Google Discover bar in full bleed and in carousel as well. And that's going to apply, it's just been on an email that came in this morning, and that's going to apply initially to the US, to Brazil, and to India. That, looking especially at Brazil and India, these are countries with a huge mobile users, right? Everybody goes on the internet in these countries from their mobiles, and that's why they're pushing them there first, I would imagine. A bit more technical, how do some of the people in some of our customers, and this is Nu.nl in Holland, they actually embed their stories into their articles, as you can see here. That's both in the app and on their website as well. So it's really, users get the story experience right into the app and into their websites. And finally, something that we're working on at the moment is actually doing that automatically. And you will see here that we're creating an SDK, so that basically the story opens up on top of your desktop, in this case, as a layer on top of the screen, and you can scroll through the different stories that you have published, or actually tap through from one to the other. We're thinking that we'll be able to launch that in the fourth quarter, maybe before the end of the year. Web stories are web pages, right? So again, you have all the analytics that you have on any single websites, and we connect to the Google Analytics simply by adding in your Google Analytics ID, and then with some configuration, you can actually start tracking everything that happens to your stories, within Google Analytics, all the page views and the individual page views, as you can see here. But what we are also doing is building in anonymized analytics into our app, because it's more and more difficult to get consent from people, to have people give consent to actually share their links. And what you're having here is a complete micro-level analytics that we're building, so that everything anonymized, so that you can see how exactly your stories are performing on what you have published. Okay, that's a little bit for the technical part. Now, this is actually the very boring part that's coming up, but I think, bear with me, it's only 5 slides, but I think it is essential that you understand kind of like what is really the objectives for web stories, right? What can you really use them for? So, and I think there's 2 objectives that you can keep in mind. And the first one is engagement. I mean, I'm talking to a lot of journalists, I'm talking to media people, and you all have a lot of content. And what you want to do is actually share that content with your users. So engagement for you is a major objective that you want to have. Metrics for that is essentially completion rates, right? Completion rates and session times, just like we saw in Kenya. It measures how good your content is actually doing. But there's more. There's also conversion, because you can also use the content that you're having basically in a web story to lead people to another source of content, using it kind of like a landing page for web stories, right? Where, and there's use cases coming up, and I'll talk more about that, where you're actually leading people through a web story to actually get to another destination. So the click-through rate is going to be important here. And from the click-through rate, depending on your monetizing model, etc., you can actually start looking at affiliate revenues, etc. So, right, that's kind of like what we see as major objectives to start using web stories. Now, what are you going to use them for? Well, we've already talked about it: emails, SMSs, that's all the outbound communication formats. WhatsApp groups works wonderfully well. Notifications. This is kind of like the way you push your images out towards your users. And again, WhatsApp groups, we have a customer in India that exclusively works with WhatsApp groups for educational products, and it works very, very well for them. The other part is inbound communication. I've already talked about the SEO of inbound communication, right? And you can embed them in your websites and in your apps, and on social media, you can actually use them as well. But I want to just quickly come back again on landing pages. I mean, if you're doing digital ads, right, and your users are used to being in an environment of social media, actually clicking through from a digital ad to a web story landing page works great for a number of reasons, because they're kind of like in the same environment, and still you have a lot more freedom with web stories than you would have with social media stories. The final one, and then that boring part is over. The final one are QR codes, maybe not as useful here in what we're doing, but we're seeing with the entire COVID situations and restaurants having to get kind of like non-printed menus, we're seeing a lot of interest of restaurants actually building their menus in a story format. We didn't think about that use case at all, but actually people scanning the QR code and actually going to a very interactive, very visual menu, and that works extremely well. Right, so let's look at a few web story use cases, because I think that's quite valuable as well. So what can you use as journalists, as media operators? What can you use web stories for? And all of the stories, all of the use cases that I'm going to show now are very much, we haven't just plucked them out of the air. They have been tried, they have been tested, and we know that they work. What always works is human interest stories, especially when you can do human interest stories that are very visual, and you can see them here. And if you want to scan the QR code there, you'll be able to open the story immediately on your phone and actually go through it. So what we've typically been seeing is that it's not unusual for human interest stories to get open rates of 80% or more. Right, and we have seen completion rates that go over 70%, people actually going towards the end. But again, something like 50% of a completion rate is definitely not unusual. This one works great because I think it's because a timeline is kind of like has a natural narrative in it, right? Because it is chronological and you can explain it. And we've seen stories like this that it's really, they become also a bit of an explainer of what has happened in a very visual and narrative format. We've seen them work extremely well, and they're relatively easy to build as well. When I was talking about conversion earlier on, I mean, this is a good example, right? When you're publishing you may be able to actually put your 5-6 headlines of the day, put them in a story. It can be done very quickly, and you push them through in an outbound communication to your readers and actually lead them through towards the long form content. So this is where we start talking again about conversion and about actually people, about using the story format, a web story format, to actually lead it to a different area eventually. And you can do that as well via a paywall, but that's entirely up to you, of course. We found it very difficult sometimes to explain very abstract principles, and we've built this story ourselves because kind of like we wanted to know how far can we take a very abstract principle such as a Gestalt theory for design and actually explain it to people in a very visual and a very easy way. Well, I didn't know what the Gestalt theory was, but basically when you go through the story, it makes it all so very clear that you're never ever going to forget it. So tutorials, stories as tutorials to actually create and share very useful information is marvelous, and it works for me. And I think this one, a recipe, is probably the best example of that, because a recipe essentially, what's a recipe, right? It is a tutorial, and what we are doing here is basically putting a video on top and putting a description underneath it, a very short description. And rather than having to go to a video, which is normally the case for recipes, right? You actually stop the video, you have to go back and didn't quite know how to do it. You have to go back and you have to actually look at it again. Here, you actually cut the content up into very small bits of video, 15 seconds or whatever, put a small description underneath it, and you just tap through the recipe rather at your own pace, and you can actually see it all happening right in front of you. You can actually learn how to boil water. Monetizing stories. There's a number of ways of monetizing stories, and probably the least intrusive way for your users to start monetizing stories is by creating sponsored stories and linking them to links to landing pages on e-commerce sites or whatever, and actually start really bringing content and linking it to a potential revenue, like what has happened here. A bit more direct, and this is a pilot that happened in Holland. Is the publisher producing a story for an advertiser, in this case Samsung, and linking it directly to their e-commerce site, right? And again, both the advertiser and the publisher were very pleased with the results. We don't have the details, but they were very pleased with the results, as we have heard it. Advertising in web stories at the moment is still pretty much early days. The ad networks, I think there's only the Google ad network that offer them for the moment, and the ad inventory is very limited if you want to go towards programmatic advertising. But in the meantime, what you already can do is actually insert advertising slides. If one page in your story is an advertisement, from where you can link through to the landing pages of the advertiser. What we've also done a test with, and I'll share the results with you in the next slide, is that basically, what if we do some kind of a banner on top of a story? And this is just testing that we have done, right? And actually people clicking through, in this case, we said it made with Tappable, and actually seeing what happens if you do that. Well, the results were pretty spectacular. You know, this is a concrete pilot that we have done in the month of September. And over a 3-day period, for the story was viewed, and it was a story that had no connection. The content of the story had no connection with the advertiser whatsoever. There were 429,000 story views, and the ad website was visited 38,000 times. And that is a click-through rate of 8.9%, and I think that is quite high if I consider that. Now, for the publisher, if you just take a CPC of $0.25, that story actually made just under $10,000, and that's probably a story that's been put together in I would say less than 2 hours. So that's not a bad return on investment. Now, the thing with stories is, how do you actually get started with these stories? And that's always a bit of an issue, right? Kind of like, do you start out of the blue, or what is happening there? And I think the best way to get started and to test how your organization, what you publish, is if there is a fit with the format or not, is by looking at existing content, selecting an existing article or whatever, uploading the visuals, and actually reformatting that into a web story. So you can build a page with content that you had. You actually cut down your long form copy into a short form copy, and actually mix it to images and start building your story from that. And that is a very good way to start testing if that format actually, if you reach an audience with your format, and how your audience responds to that particular format. Of course, we're very happy to help you get started. I mean, in the tool that I'll be showing you later on, there is an in-app chat. I mean, we organize onboarding sessions to get people understanding how to use the tool. We do workshops, in-depth workshops. We set up pilots with customers, and really measure and really set up the objectives and the metrics and where we want to go to, and timelines, etc. But when we also do team training sessions for your staff. Right, I'm a bit too fast. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share screens. I'm going to actually go to another screen now. There we go. I'm going to take you through, in the time that's left to me, and that's probably about half an hour. So I'm going to take you through how we build a story. And what we have done is we've built a story around Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because I think she's somebody that has been able to generate a lot of interest in what she has done and what's her life. And there's a lot of images around there that we've been able to select and work with. So when you log into Tappable, and I'll share you a bit more of how you can do that later on, because at the moment we are still actually we are fully operational. We're doing about 1 million story views a month at the moment with our customers, but we're by invitation only, because we've got a fairly large early sign-up list, and we want to have the people that actually signed up first come on board first as well. But let me come back to you at the end of this quick demo that I'm going to do here now. So Tappable is a multi-workspace tool, and that's pretty important, because I don't know, it depends on your organizations, but some organizations have got multiple brands in their organization. You may have a news brand, and you may have a showbiz brands that are completely different. So for each of those brands, you can actually create a workspace and define a lot of things in the workspace. So you can see a number of my workspaces here that I've got access to. So let's go to Tappable, to the Tappable workspace here. And then you'll immediately gonna see two different parts. You see the bottom part here, and I'm gonna start with that, which has got everything to do with your brand assets. Because let's face it, if you want to actually push out content in a story format or in whatever format, it's always gonna be very important that you have your brand assets, right? Your users, your readers, they want to actually understand what the brand behind your content is. So colors and gradients, it's very easy. You just add a color, you just put in the color code, or you just choose it from a color picker, and you actually put all your colors, your brand colors, up front into your workspace. The same applies to gradients. Very quick word about gradients. Very important in web stories, because it allows you to actually get a lot of text coming out of the story that otherwise, if you have a pretty clear background and a clear text here, that otherwise wouldn't be visible. So you can actually drop your your gradients in there as well, or create your gradients there as well. Images and videos. Well, this is pretty important because this is here where you're going to actually put all your brand, really your brand logos, etc. You're going to actually drop them in here and use them throughout everything that you're doing, so that you always got a very consistent representation of the brand, of your brand. So you can see a number of things here as well. I'll come back to that later on as well. But it's very easy. It's a drag and drop editor. So basically you take your content, you drop the files into it, and we're going to do the rendering in the back end. It's always going to be in the right format. It's always going to be right for that particular format, which is the web story. We also link to Unsplash, to Giphy, and to Giphy stickers. And we also scrape from websites. So if you, for instance, have already had an article published with a lot of photos in there, the only thing you have to do is go to the URL from that article, actually scrape the images, and you've uploaded them immediately into Tappable. The same applies to fonts, right? Most publishers use proprietary fonts. Very simple. Take the file, drop it in here. We take all possible file formats. You just drop them in there, and then you have to do some work on basically characterizing, giving the criteria for the fonts, so that we'll actually be able to find it in a search later on. If you don't have proprietary fonts, there's Google Fonts where you can choose from as well. Leaves us to go to the settings, right? And I'm very quickly going to do that to show you. At Tappable, we do the entire backend. So we do the rendering, the hosting, and the delivery. So the link that we are going to use, the default URL that we are going to use, is going to be a tappable.link. So you may have, I say WashingtonTimes.tappable.link is going to be the default link in that case. You can, however, override that by creating your own URL, a subdomain from your own URL. Tappable.co is our URL, and we just created a subdomain, stories.tappable.co, as a subdomain. And you do that very simply by actually creating a CNAME and dropping it in to the tool, and you'll be immediately able to start publishing under a subdomain. Here you can see that you can add the Google Analytics to it as well. Editorial teams, right? It's very simple. You don't build a story on yourself. I mean, you can, there's no problem to that, but very generally it is a team effort. And so you can actually add team people from your team to the tool here, and they can start working with it. You can give them an editor or an administrator role as you wish. Right, billing, that's very simple. We are pre-revenue at the moment. That's not entirely true, because we do have enterprise customers, but actually what automatic billing is concerned, it's completely blank at the moment, but that is going to change as well. So having gone through this entire bottom part here, let's look at what we have at the top. So at the top, we have either got drafts, and we got your published stories, right? And I was talking about the notorious RGB. So we built a story about RGB, and I'm going to use that story to quickly talk you through a number of kind of like, how shall I say, kind of like not only tips and tricks, but best practices for stories from our experience, at least. And very quickly, through this screen, right? What you're seeing here is a sidebar that has got your story assets. So what you're doing here is you start and you see this same, these same buttons come back. So you actually upload your story assets for that particular story into this file here. It has got everything that has to do with publishing, and it's got everything that has to do with your story settings, which is basically the metadata and the meta images. But let's get back to the editor now. So how stories are built is basically layer by layer and block by block. So you can see that we have added a number of blocks. That there's a number of blocks here. It goes from a background block, which obviously is the bottom layer. You put a video on top of it, a rectangle on top, etc. So, and then what you're doing, you're working in the middle section of the screen here, and the results is actually coming up in this preview that you're seeing here. So first thing about stories is it never where they say that the cover, that you shouldn't look at the cover to actually buy the book. You should look at the cover for the stories. The cover should speak for itself. And, that's why in the cover, there's always going to be what we suggest, relatively bold graphics, bold colors, so that basically, as you can see here, it kind of like incites you to go on reading, right? So the same continues. I mean, it is a fairly young format, so we have opted here as well. We could have kind of like made an obituary for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but what we've tried to do here is make it very colorful and very like today's content, right, in all of this. So made it very colorful, made it pretty short. So how we're working, the background in this case is a dark background. And we dropped on that, we just dropped a video into this background. In the video, you can see you can change the focal point of that video so that you can actually change it, which is not necessary here because it's a full bleed video. But if you have a smaller video, you can actually easily change the focal point. You can add colors, etc. I'm not going to go into that at all. You can disable or enable the sound. And on top of that, what we've done here, and this is a neat one. This is where I can explain actually the background. On the bottom of the video here, we've added a little bit of a block, and that block actually contains a gradient, as you can see here. So what that does is when you see the image, there is no brutal line between the image block here, the video block here, and the dark or the black background text block that you're seeing here. So it actually gives a transition, makes it a smoother transition. On top of that, we've added a text block. And this is a rich text editor that you all know, which has got all of the information that you need to have. You can change, you can do the alignment, top and bottom, left or right. You can change the sizes, color, text color, etc. And important here, because we are talking about SEO, is that you can actually start changing the SEO importance. It doesn't change anything to the text format or whatever. It just lets Google know in a search that this is the title one, right? And we've added here the image uses that we've used, and we've done that vertically, which is very handy as well. So this is how you start building up your story, your images. So same applies here. What we have done here is that we've created the video, and the effects have been created before we upload the video. We've just started to actually add the effects. So we uploaded the video including the effects, and we've added that here on top of the background. What you're seeing here is that there is an enormous amount of fonts that you can use, and what we've really been doing here is actually make sure that the font matches the image as well, and it shows you really kind of like everything where you can go to. Similar here. I mean, I don't have to go through every single slide of this, but again, works. And this is where we start to go into the buttons, right? And you can add pages, you can add buttons, click-throughs to every single page that you want. And you can do that either by a button, which is like this, which you have to format in a way, or you can do it by a swipe up as well, which I don't think we've used in this story, unless it's here. No, but you can also do a swipe up as well. So once we're happy with the story, what we have to do is actually publish it, right? So here you will see, when you start working with it, you will see a checklist coming up, and that checklist is going to say, right, did you think about your metadata? Did you actually give your story a title? Did you give it the proper description with the proper keywords in it? Did you actually do the meta images? This is the image that's going to be used when the story is going to be shared on social media, in WhatsApp or whatever. And did you actually give your story also the proper poster image? What you're seeing here, because let's face it, stories is a mobile content, right? We do have a desktop presentation version that you're seeing here, which actually makes it also very colorful, very, very engaging, but it is essentially a mobile format. So what we're using as a backdrop for the desktop format is the poster image that's also going to be shared, or is also going to be seen in the Google searches. Right. You can configure that a little bit, but that's all pretty straightforward. So once we've done all this, and then I can see there's no more checklist here. So I've basically done everything that I needed to do. We're always working with story previews. I'm just going to generate another preview. What this actually means is that we're creating a random URL that's non-indexed, that's non-traceable, that you can use to actually preview the story, sent to whoever within the organization is going to have the final go for publish or not, and they can easily open it either from the screen share or from a desktop view. And this is how the story is going to look like in preview. This link remains live for 24 hours, then it disappears. You can renew that as many times. If you have to do changes to the story, it's going to come up again. But here you see how the story is going to be shown, in this case, on a desktop. Right? This only leaves us with one thing to do, and that's basically to publish. And that's it. It's very, very easy, as you've seen. We have created, that story is now live under our subdomain, as you see here, stories.tappable.co. It has the URL, the notorious RBJ behind it, and it has all the links. So there is a story copy link that you can easily use. There is the copy embed code, and this is a handy one because basically what it's going to do, it is going to create an embed code that you can use in an iframe to put it into your app or into your website, and you can immediately link the story to a number of social media platforms that we have done here. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating. This story, as you can see it now, is live. It has the proper URL. It has the proper subdomain, and it can now be found in any Google search. That is pretty much what I wanted to talk to you about. There's one thing I have to mention. So, I mean, and I think, Anna, you can share the link that I sent you with the audience. So we have created a link that allows you, that gets you immediate access to the tool. So you can immediately start to use it. The tool is free to use during our launch period. It is very, you can use it, you can start using it immediately. We are free, and also if you want to publish the story, it is free for up to 100,000 story views per month that you can use. So please do take advantage of that. It will not remain free forever. And you can also do this by simply going to tappable.co, click on the early access list, and we've made it in such a way that you will get an automated email with your registration already pre-formed so that you can actually start using it immediately. That's pretty much what I had to say. I think there's about 15 minutes left for questions. Is that correct, Anna?
Thank you very much for this amazing presentation. We learned together how we can create this new mobile format, how we can take advantage of these new tools, and most importantly, how can we convert and monetize this content. And also, we saw how human interest stories or timeline stories can help media to engage with the new mobile audiences. So thank you very much for this, Hans. We have a couple of questions from our participants. We have a first question that can be a little bit more tech from Roman, and is asking, does Tappable have a MP or API?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Tappable is 100% compliant with the AMP technology. And yes, I didn't specify that, so it's a very good question, because web stories used to be AMP stories in the past, but there's been a kind of like a rebranding towards web stories. Yes, we are 100% AMP compliant. And I think there's even, we've also incorporated into the story publishing that you can run an AMP test immediately from the tool. So you just open the AMP test, it's going to scan the story that you've made and confirm that it is AMP compatible. And yes, we have an API, but I'm definitely not the technical guy. As you can see, I'm far too old for that. But yes, it is there. You can use it. We have documentation about that, and also the SDK that we're building will actually take that one step further.
Thank you, Hans. And now we have another question. And this person is asking if there is a concern that reporters and journalists using this kind of format will end up shifting to more shallow, reductive, and sensationalist content that can be expressed briefly and in pictures.
I mean, look at me, right? I'm definitely not of the generation that grew up with web stories, but it depends on the. It depends on, I think, two things: is how much quality do you want to put behind the work that you're doing, the web stories that you're creating, and I don't think that you can create. You can call the Ruth Bader Ginsburg story that we made. I don't think that you can call that shallow, right? It has, however, a more modern, a more appealing format for users that are essentially on mobile phones. And that doesn't preclude stories from using long form content or vice versa. I think the two complement each other. And really, the ambition should be, and I think also with this Ruth Bader Ginsburg story, that because we really went through it as such, the ambition should be is that people actually saying that may not know about what she has done in her life, but the ambition should be that, you know, from that story, they should actually get the idea, right, that person could be inspiring. Let me read more about it. Let me go through to a long format. Let me see what I can find it on the internet. And I think that is really what web stories are about. But it really depends on the publisher. It really depends on your guidelines, your audience, what you want to do it, if you want to produce shallow or really very deep content, which is perfectly possible.
Yeah, thank you, Hans, for your answer. It was a challenging question. And now we have more tech questions. We have a question from Jan. And he's asking if it's possible to have a screen to authorize access to the story.
Yes, it's not been deployed yet. I'm not entirely sure what that is, but we have a consent screen that we have built it. It's not yet authorized. I think it's going to be used for spirits, alcohol, because of course web stories is also a marketing tool. So it's going to be used for adult content, and it's going to also be used for something else, which I'm escaped. Yes, the code is there. It hasn't been deployed yet, but I think that's going to happen within the month of October. I hope I've answered to the question.
I think so. And now we have a question from Lisa. She says that my employers have a house style, fonts, colors, etc. Will it be possible to develop content through Tappable, but using our house style?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, that's what I tried to explain, and apparently I didn't succeed in that all that well. Apologies for that. So basically, you set your brand assets, you set your house style up front. You know, you drop in the colors, you drop in the fonts, you drop in the visual images that you need to have, and you keep on using that. Yes, absolutely. And I think that is very, very important. I think it's very important that you brand your content correctly and that you're using your house style to do it. Yes, it's just a little bit of work to actually set it up. But once it's set up, you can use it for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Hans, for your answer. And we have a last question about the billing. Can you please tell us more about the future of billing? What will you be charging and when?
Yeah, and the sun's coming to shine in when we talk about billing. That must be an omen, I think. No, yes, indeed. I think there'll be a number of standard plans. And it's a typical SaaS product around the billing, where we'll be looking at features and a number of story views on a monthly basis and build it up from there. And those billing plans, I expect them that we'll go live with the billing somewhere in the first quarter next year. Anything over a certain amount of usage, and that's essentially going to be usage on the number of story views per month, is going to be put into enterprise plans. So I assume that most of the somewhat larger media companies are immediately going to drop into the enterprise plans. So again, enterprise plans, we started already billing enterprise customers at the moment. We are not billing yet the smaller customers. And as I mentioned earlier, at the moment, the use of Tappable is free. Use it, test it, test what you can do with it. And it is free for up to 100,000 story views per month. And that's a reasonable amount. I mean, you can do some serious testing with that.
Okay, Hans, that's a great invitation. So please don't hesitate and visit tappable.com and just explore the platform. We have a next question from Matthew, and he wants to know, once the web store is created, is it possible to download or upload elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely, Matthew. Yeah, there is an export. You may not have seen it, but when you publish a story, there is an export button. So we export the entire story, both for your archive, and you can actually also use the story images to actually upload into another platform. We are working on a more elaborate version of that, so that when you create stories on Tappable, you will be able to actually also use them straight into Instagram or Facebook or other social media stories. It is quite a technically challenging development work that we have to do there. So that is on the roadmap for 2021.
Thank you, Hans. And I want to share with you also the good comments from our audience. Here we have Corinne says that this was a really useful session, and she had learned so much. No questions because you cover everything so clearly. So that's a really good comment. And we have a lot of comments like that. We have also Flash Double G. And they say that it was a great presentation and the tool looks very good. So thank you very much. Guys, we invite you. We have still a couple of minutes for questions. So we can wait a little bit more. However, I can take this time to remind you that tomorrow we're going to have our last day of our first summit on audience. Please join us tomorrow. Be careful because tomorrow we're going to start at a different hour. We're going to start at 2 p.m. Central European Summer Time. So we're going to have this afternoon session. Please feel free to visit our website and check our next speakers and really interesting sessions. I think we have one more question here from Roman, now that we have a couple of minutes. He's asking, Cyrillic support?
Yep.
Sorry
Yep.
if I'm not correct.
Cyrillic script. I will have to check to be 100% sure, but I'm 99% sure, yes. The only problem script where we have an issue with at the moment is right to left. So that is still an issue, but I think anything that goes left to right is supported, also Cyrillic script. 99, make it 99.5%. But drop me an email if you want to know that, and I'll definitely reply to that with the full 100%.
Thank you, Hans. So they mentioned that there was a question about analytics. Can you go a little bit deeper on this topic, how they can take advantage of the analytics in Tappable?
Yeah, sure. Analytics, you can actually drop in your Google Analytics ID. Once you've done that, you have to do a little bit of configuration in the Google Analytics to actually make the stories show up and the story metrics show up as really as story metrics and not just as website metrics. We've written some documentation about that. So if you knew that, again, if you need that, just please drop me an email and I'll send that to you. What we're also doing, because actually we're seeing fewer and fewer of our website visitors, for instance, also accepting the consent pop-up. So, and that's going to continue, right? So what we're currently doing is we're building in the backend micro-level analytics that's really going to show you everything that's happening with your stories overall, and with every particular story and every particular page, what is actually going to happen. It's going to show things like the completion rate, how many pages people have seen. It's also going to contain things like clicks and where they clicked on. So that's all on our roadmap. The basic version is already in the tool. It's already there. It's going to evolve quite a little bit over the next couple of times, so that you have anonymized, because in our tool it's going to be anonymized, so that you have anonymized data and metrics that really tell you how your stories are performing, which pages are best performing, and you can actually start making conclusions about it and start rearranging, start redesigning some of the pages to actually and measure that impact of what you've just done, measure that immediately.
Thank you, Hans. And then we have time for one last question from Elena. So she says, hello, Hans. Thank you very much for your presentation. One last question. It is possible to share directly the story in your own Instagram account?
Yeah, as a URL, yes. I think if you have a URL, you can drop the URL into your Instagram account. Like you can drop it into any social media or into any platform, essentially, and work it from there. So if people click on it, they're going to open the URL. I think Instagram is a little bit more of a tricky one. Again, the other way to do it is to export the images from the export feature in the tool and upload them again in Instagram as images, and use them as images in a story if you want to. What we are working, as I said earlier on, it's quite a big project. What we're working on is basically creating your story in Tappable and being able to export it as stories, really as stories, into Facebook and into Instagram, but that is a feature that's not ready just at the moment yet.
Okay, Hans, thank you very much for your time, for your amazing presentation. I think now it's time to wrap up our session, our journey today.